All right, well then I will call the meeting of the Ramsey County Home Rule Charter Committee to order, and we can resume the discussion we were having. So there was somebody that was displeased. What were your concerns?
He didn't really expand upon his concerns, other than to say something about,
If you guys were doing your job right, we wouldn't be here in the beginning,
yeah,
or in the first place.
yeah. Essentially, if you guys weren't wasting our time on this and doing your other part of your job correctly, then we would be fine, basically. So I didn't want to have a back and forth about that in the meeting, obviously, so I just said, okay, that's fine. I appreciate your comment.
His wife asked a few questions, but that was his one remark. He said, well, I better put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, and he was kind of the last guy to speak, and that was fine. I mean, yeah, it's right to voice his opinion. What I got from it was he didn't think that there was much value in what we were trying to explore. And that's okay. Quite all right. Basically, just to I guess it is okay with you all.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Basically, in the 2 meetings we had last week, I made a few notes, and Lucas was at the first one, Anthony and I were at both of them, as was Rodney. We had some good discussion, a lot of really good input on what people were looking for and what they weren't looking for, essentially, what kind of value they thought they might have in it. I would say, the second meeting was obviously focused more on taxation, more about what could or couldn't be done with it, more parameters behind taxation, I should say, is probably the best way to put it. So, the idea of maybe instead of setting, and I don't know what the legality behind it, but a sales tax is generally a 50 and then one person rule. Setting it at 60 instead was one of the suggestions, echoed by multiple people in the room.
Yeah.
So that if you're going to tax, it's something that you really have to, everybody really has to want, basically. Also, the idea of if you're not even necessarily sales tax, but any kind of taxation, that the ability that would be put in the charter to delineate that it's for this, that the charter basically spells out that you have to, if you go and ask for a tax, you have to state what it's for, length of time, sunset. I mean, it's very restricted parameters basically in that taxation, so you can't just be like, we're gonna get a half a cent, we're gonna use it for anything.
For general fund.
Yeah, a general fund, basically we would say we want a half cent, we want it specifically for, and we use that example, it's on the LEC if we're gonna say you have to do a renovation. Half a cent, LEC, 15 years, sunsets at that point, and that's the end of it. And then one of the other suggestions was if you did something like that, then to put a parameter on the back end of it that says you can't come back and ask for a sales tax again, or whatever that particular tax was for a certain amount of time, basically.
For that quantity.
For that quantity,
So if you did a half-cent sales tax for the LEC, for example, there would be a 1-year moratorium on reinstating that half-cent sales tax for whatever other
or whatever you would want to set as a moratorium. Essentially, because you run into that problem of you get a half cent passed and then it'll sunset in 30 years, but you write it the right way so it doesn't necessarily have to sunset unless the commission votes to sunset it. And then they go, but there's more stuff we can pay for, and then they just keep it in place for other things.
Okay.
The general concern with the sales tax in general is always cumulative. In other words, it rarely sunsets. So once you get used to that, say 5% sales tax, going to 6% isn't that big of a deal, especially over a 10-year period. It's a slow creep that doesn't really ever go backwards. And that was the main concern kind of brought up in the meeting.
Was it discussed that expenses are a slow creep as well?
Not really.
I mean, that's fine, and I think that's those are all really valid points.
Yeah, and I guess I took it away, the whole point of the idea was it was supposed to be informational, and I framed it in the meeting on Thursday very similar to what we did on Tuesday. More than anything, we're trying to get ideas of what people are looking for, so we're not shooting in the dark completely and coming up with something that everyone's going to go, no, we don't think this is anything we could ever get behind.
Okay.
And, I would say, the tenor of the room was obviously, in a town like Devils Lake, we're very conservative when it comes to taxation, and we don't wanna just throw taxes on ourselves for no reason. And
It
that's-
wasn't a flat out no though.
No,
either.
but there was no flat out no's in the room other than maybe that one gentleman in the
Yeah.
back. Everyone else was very cautious about it, but they said if it was framed correctly and it had parameters in place to make sure it wasn't abused, then they might be okay with it. We fielded a couple questions about townships and how it would affect townships, and Daryl had those questions, and I told him essentially it wouldn't affect townships at all. It's another political stuff, but we could put express language in that says this will never affect how a township operates, essentially, because some of the home rules do have express language that states that. The Tuesday meeting for the individual, you guys that weren't there, basically there were the discussion on what specific things we'd like to put in it. Some people were of the opinion that maybe more of a broad charter would be useful. Some were thinking it would be more specific.
And I think
this and this.
to color those concerns, I think at least on Tuesday, from what I recall, those that were in favor of it being broad were in favor of it being broad to preserve its ability to be flexible.
Yeah.
So that we wouldn't have to go back to the well to amend it if need be. And those who were concerned about it were perhaps desired it to be limited in scope. Their desire stemmed from a belief that it wouldn't pass if it was broad. So it wasn't that, I think the concern about it being limited wasn't because they were opposed necessarily to it being broad, but rather that they felt that it was better to pass a charter at all than to risk not passing one. Would you say that's a fair characterization of the discussion?
Yeah, I believe so. To a point. There was some thought, I think, that, that's kind of how I would characterize it, because obviously at both meetings we talked about the feeling of, efficiencies in government and elected officials and how, and I think the general thought process in both meetings was people would like to see us keep the elected officials as it is currently. My thought would be, I want to keep them as it is currently, and maybe if you wrote the charter so that in the future maybe something could happen, in terms of if you really thought something was affected, but you would ask the people. It wouldn't be a commission ordinance decision, because I think that's too broad, at least in my opinion.
I agree. I think based on that concern, and now that you said that was the concern on Thursday as well, I think that as we look at drafting language, it might make sense to draft a provision speaking specifically about the status of elected officials in the county, which we could say that no currently elected individual may have their status changed during the course of their term. And that's basically, we could write it in such a way that the only time that you could potentially change the status of an elected official to an appointed official was when that person no longer decided to seek office. And I know that that's the way that other counties have done it, but I don't know that they used specific verbiage to explicitly state that that's
Yeah, it was kind of just an implied thing, but I think it would be, at least in my opinion too.
And then in that case, it would still go for a vote of the people.
Yeah.
But the only time that vote of the people could be done, if we worded it the right way, would be if a currently elected official was leaving their position, not seeking re-election. But that's the only time that you could.
My only concern with that is, say, for example, 20 years from now, Candy decides not to run, it's going to be sooner than that, I would guess. You've already been here 20 years.
Yeah, I was
so.
like, I already got 24.
Yeah, so you've only got about another 10 or 12 years, But, so, say you had the discussion and you said, okay, Candy's ready to retire. We want to maybe, and Candy probably would be the best example because we're almost probably, but say you want to make the auditor an appointed position at that point. Okay, well then the problem would be Candy's going to retire and you're going to vote at the same election probably if you want to make it an appointed position, but you're still going to have to elect somebody because she's not going to be there the day after the election if you don't elect somebody. Well, you will be until you're not serving anymore, but you know what I mean? So you would have that We'd be electing to make it an appointed position, or voting to make it an appointed position
On the
with an
same
auditor that's retiring. So you'd still have to have, you'd almost have to have the situation where 2 years ahead of time, that person would have to give you a heads up. I'm going to retire next time, let's have the discussion now. So on the prime, or in the interim, so instead of 18, 20, or whatever, you could have that election then. So you'd almost have to frame it that way,
Right.
which would make it a little more difficult, but
Well, and then
know
I
where I'm
think,
getting at.
for the most part, I think it's rather rare for someone who's in kind of a career-oriented elected position to not know when they're gonna retire. So I still don't think that necessarily makes it dead in the water, and if they didn't know, then you just couldn't have a vote, right, or you couldn't schedule a vote. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying we could frame it that way, that so essentially, it wouldn't be just cut and dry, this is when you have to do something, I don't know how you frame it exactly, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but maybe it should be, it'd be more helpful.
But I believe that there is a way that you could
Yeah,
frame it
I
that way, because to me, that seems to be the recurring concern, both among the currently elected county, employees, as well as members of the public. And I think that those are valid concerns and certainly worth working, but I agree that, so as not to leave ourselves without an ability in the future to find county efficiencies, should they present themselves, it might be good to word it in such a way that allows for that reshuffling.
Yeah, and I can't remember who made the point at the meeting, but it was a valid point in that we're talking about something like putting in the ability for an initiative or a referendum, and we want to give the people more power, but then at the same time, you want to make it an ordinance possibly that the county commission can essentially take away elected officials, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're attempting to leave the people power, you should ask them if you want to make it.
But I agree, and I think that it should be a vote.
No, and I think so too, because that's a huge change, and
So
the people should have the right to.
Could it be worded,
Be in on that.
to put it another way, could it be worded that during the duration of an elected official's term, their status as an elected official may not be changed to that of an appointed official, so that is a clause on its own. Then the next clause could be, the county commission may not seek to initiate a vote on the status of any of the currently elected county employees unless it is obtained in writing and signed by the currently elected office holder that they will not seek re-election in the next election. And then you add another third clause, which is that secondary clause does not apply to initiated measures by the citizenship.
Yes, of course.
So then that way, you basically say, we're not gonna touch anyone during their term, that's ossified, that's codified. Then you say the county commission may only attempt a change if they have it in writing that that person will not seek re-election. And thirdly, you still put it all back in the public's power, which is, the public can do it anytime.
Yeah, if they want to initiate a measure at any time that says we want to make the auditor an appointed position, they can.
I mean, does that seem like a pretty fair way to characterize a solution to that?
Works for me.
I'm hoping for a way to simplify that, but yes.
3 clauses is too many?
You probably lost over half the voters already.
Why was that complicated? Was it?
People don't read that much when they.
Oh, I know.
Well, but
They
you
just
were-
want
but-
line
But
one,
you,
line two, line three,
you wouldn't
yes or no.
necessarily, because like when you,
Well,
You know,
here's what it comes down to though, I guess, in my opinion, looking at it is, how many people in the county are gonna read the whole charter in its entirety from front to?
Oh, very few.
Probably the
5.
people on this committee and a handful of people out in the community. It's our job as a committee
to boil
to
it down.
write it so that it is legally sound,
Yeah.
and it has the principles there, and then to break it down into bullet points and tell people what this thing is gonna do and show the people, so it's not confusing. So it's kind of a twofold thing. We have to make sure that it's airtight basically, but at the same time, we have to tell people, this is what it'll do, and not confuse them. And that comes down to essentially, I don't like to call it marketing, but you know what, it's a sales pitch pretty much to a point. If we all feel that this is something that's worth, the county worth having basically. And that's a discussion for, once we kind of get the whole thing put down and we're comfortable where we're at, we go through the open meeting, the hearing,
Yeah, public hearing.
public hearing, and then we can really coordinate it.
Candy, did you write that down, or do you want me to write that down?
I didn't write anything down.
So while
It's on tape.
I'm taking, yeah, that's true. While I'm taking notes on what I just said, can we approve the agenda from last time?
Oh,
the minutes
good.
from last time?
Yeah.
So is there a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? And does anyone have any comments with respect to it?
Another discussion on email for adding some of the discussion in. I don't know if I got a reply to that. So I thought it was Rodney that replied back basically saying that we had discussed a few things that weren't on the minutes.
Oh, I guess I never saw that.
Rodney doesn't have,
Oh, maybe it wasn't him.
I sent an email
Okay.
regarding.
Oh,
the
I
fact
do
that
remember
we-
reading that, but that was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent it right after I got it,
Yeah.
stating that we had discussed,
the survey.
yeah, thank you.
And that wasn't in the minutes.
No.
And it added it when she,
Oh, okay, so it's in the, it's in the amended
It's in
minutes
here.
then? Okay,
yeah.
okay, so basically we just need a motion to approve the amended minutes then. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Approval of today's agenda.
I move to approve today's agenda.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carried. Okay, great.
We kinda
Now we did
we kinda
Robert's Rules of Order a little bit. There you go. That's right.
Well, you're taking notes, I'll hand these to, we got a couple of responses to the questionnaire, so I'll just
Okay.
let you guys kind of read them and see what you,
Also, one did go out.
here, you guys weren't there, I should hand these to you. Yeah.
No, an email did go out to.
No, you're talking about questionnaires.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, this was the information sheet we used,
Oh, okay.
and then a questionnaire is on the second page.
Oh.
Yes. I apologize, I should have handed them to you right away.
That's okay.
I put together the information sheet, and basically I sourced it mostly from, the first bullet points were from the Omdahl thing that he kind of gave a background. And then the bottom part was just, basically what we've done and what our timeline basically kind of is. So people had an idea of, where we're at in this whole process basically.
Yeah, I got it.
And then Lucas put the questionnaire together and we got a few responses, but most of it was just, the verbal responses and the discussion at the meeting. So. Excuse me. Keep drinking coffee. Any more energy? Real late man. Weren't sure what it said or what?
No, I was just wondering who Paul.
Oh, Paul? You don't know who Paul is?
I don't know, but I do.
Paul farms right out northeast of me.
Okay, he's a farmer.
Served on the water.
Yeah, he was on the Ramsey County Water Board. Yeah, he's been very active in all kinds of stuff. He's on the Farm Bureau Board, County Farm Bureau Board. He's on the Greater Ramsey Water District, overseeing the rural water systems. Yeah, he's big in water. He's done water stuff for a lot of his, it's one of his main interests. Yeah, he's very, very active in the community. You see him around at a lot of farm meetings and stuff. He farms with his brother and his 2 nephews. Yeah, they're my neighbors. They're only probably, 3 or 4 miles as the crow flies from my place to the northeast.
What did you think the level of understanding was at the meetings?
think at the beginning, probably not the best to a point, but I think people kind of understood more as we went forward. And, you know, as was said at the first meeting, you know, we don't have anything drafted, so it's really hard to say, oh, this is what it's gonna do. But I think people at least I think we accomplished what we were looking for. We got feedback and we informed people what it could possibly do, what it couldn't possibly do. So at least they have that baseline knowledge going into once they start looking at it, once it's drafted. If they want to read the whole thing, they at least have some idea of where the heck it's coming from. Instead of going, what's this thing do? I mean, so they, you know, they have the idea. And, you know, what it comes down to is, I would think a majority of the people, obviously, at the meetings, were people that are pretty well informed of the community and, you know, they're interested in that kind of thing. So they already at least have some kind of baseline information. But there were a few people there that were there simply because they didn't have a clue what it was.
So do we feel that it overall was a valuable thing to have these informational meetings?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, very much so.
Good. Okay, so,
More than anything, I mean, for the information for them, but we got a lot of feedback. And I think that's positive because, you know, a lot of that feedback is gonna help us sculpt the document so it's something that's palatable and something that people can agree to, you know?
Especially in these initial phases.
sure. So, and I'm not gonna ask for a vote, but rather just the sentiment of the committee here assembled with respect to a clause detailing the status and change of status of elected officials within Ramsey County. Or rather, it wouldn't be a clause, but it's a subclause, whatever you would call that. And I don't speak very good legalese either, so we would definitely want the state's attorney to correct me. But I think that it would be boiled down into four subclauses. The first is, no elected official of the county may have their status changed during their current term. Second clause is, the county commission may not initiate a vote of the people to change or alter the status of an elected position or convert any position to appointment, except for when the commission has received written confirmation that the current office holder will not seek re-election. 3, the voters of Ramsey County may initiate a measure to change or alter the status of an elected official at any time, and would have to add in there that the way that they would initiate is the same for anything, so we'll need an initiation clause, a right to initiate. And 4, a vote with respect to any elected position in the county may only take place at a regular scheduled election as scheduled by, or a regular election as scheduled by North Dakota Century Code.
Yeah, so they don't want it to be a special, so we're adding a bunch of cost, yeah, I agree.
So I think those 4 clauses, I think, would pretty much cover the issue.
Yeah, it would have to be a primary or general, because we don't want to have to start throwing a bunch of special elections together.
Right.
We don't have to, because that costs a lot of money. No reason to have a special, no reason.
I thought so that we were.
Back to my point, I guess, that I had sent in earlier about the survey that we discussed. Did we decide just to forego a survey to the people that were affected by this job and not ask them to speak out as far as what they thought about it?
Well, so we did get feedback from Lisa at the first meeting. I think we've had Candy's feedback, unless you'd like to expound upon it. And the only other person to speak would be Katie, if you have anything to say.
Well, and I thought,
I was looking to remain elected, and my other thing was, is then if it were to change, I would prefer to see it go to a vote of the people, because anytime you take power away from the people, I think they should take it away from themselves. And so, basically what you just covered sounds reasonable to me. I mean, that's basically what I probably would have asked for, so, good job.
Candy, do you have thoughts?
no,
Does that seem reasonable?
I mean, I'm probably sitting here if I keep going, I'm gonna be, I'm only 40, almost 42. I've got 25 years left. So I could potentially be here for a very long time yet, so.
I don't,
Yeah.
and I guess, and I'm not gonna speak for Kelly, but I don't really feel that that's fair for you to put her on the spot like that, to ask her in this room how she feels. I mean, I think that the reason we were discussing the survey And great for Katie, you know, to speak up like she did and give her response, which is awesome, I mean, that's her response. But and I didn't hear Lisa's, did you?
I don't remember what.
Well, it was at Tuesday's discussion.
Okay, and we weren't there, so we didn't hear what Lisa's response was.
Well, do we, I guess to that question, do we want to draft a formal questionnaire, or would the members of the committee just like to visit with those individuals one-on-one to kind of get some feedback, or?
Do that.
I mean, I don't know if we need something formal or more just an informal conversation, I mean, because there's only 3 people that are affected by this. We've already heard Katie's thoughts on it, so if you know, off camera, just visit with Lisa and visit with Candy individually, so at least we can get some ideas, I mean, that'd be fine with me, or if you think it's more of a formal process would be good, that's fine too.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with Adam. The only other thing that I would say is it might be helpful to take something like this to each of them and say, do you have qualms with this?
Yeah.
And if so, what might they be? Or what would you
And
like
that's a
to?
good idea. I just don't feel comfortable voting on it.
I didn't,
He did.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean,
Yeah, and I agree that, you know, that verbiage might be good, and maybe presenting that and asking, you know, is this fair, and is this what you agree with? And if that was, I guess that wording then wouldn't have been at the meetings for Lisa,
No.
to see.
Yeah, and I would state that at the first meeting that Lisa was at there, she said that, you know, it's tough to have an opinion on this, especially with respect to this, because you guys don't have anything written down yet as to what you want to do. So at least having a concept, I think, that you could tell her, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking, what do you think? I mean, it's not set in stone, this is kind of what we're thinking, might work, positive, negative, give us some feedback on it. And maybe it could be just, we write that up and we give her a sheet saying this is what we're kind of thinking, and you know, write down your feedback, or just give it to us verbally or whatever, so we have an idea. I agree, we need their feedback.
And another thing, and this is just moving forward, once this committee is dissolved and gone, it'd be nice to have you know, I wasn't there, like I said again, but, you know, did we get Lisa's in writing, or is it, you know, Katie's is on recording, so we will know that. But going forward, when this committee's gone, you know, will people be able to look back and say, oh, well, these 3 have, you know, stated that they were for this, so that somebody at some point.
So now I'm confused, because you said a minute ago that we shouldn't ask them to speak on the record, and now we want them on the record.
I don't want them to at some point say they didn't get a voice.
Sure, well, I understand that.
So whether it be you know, whether it be a survey that's in here that doesn't have their name on it, but it's a survey that's saying they had a voice. She obviously had a voice, she spoke out. Lisa spoke out at some meeting you were at, but it's not recorded. And, you know, whether she puts it in a survey or puts her name on it, I don't care. But just so that it's, you know, recorded that this committee asked, and recorded or non-recorded.
Recorded responses.
Yeah,
Would it be reasonable to say maybe we put that thought process in paper, give it to Lisa, give her some time to digest it, and then the next time we meet, we give her some time here to come and speak in front of us? Or do you think it would be more reasonable to put it on paper?
yeah, whatever way she.
Whatever she's comfortable with.
Yeah, whatever
I
she's
think,
comfortable.
I guess my thought would be, let's empower Lucas to go talk with Lisa, you know, your
Right.
portfolio holder to start with.
Yeah,
Give her that information and say, would you like to come speak with us at the next meeting about this, or just, you know, give us your thoughts in writing about it,
Sure,
and then it'll be on
Yeah,
record at
she
that
either
point. And the
email
same
it,
with
write
Candy,
it.
can sit down and write down
Yeah.
something, and she could go, this is horrible.
well, and
Whatever.
if we're extending that, then I think we have to do that with Katie too,
Of course.
which is to say that, you know, Katie, if you want more time to think about it,
you know.
reconsider it.
Well, people are gonna ask us.
Sure.
People are gonna ask us, and I don't think, I talked to Lisa before this meeting, because she asked if I was coming, and so I said, well, do you wanna stay elected, Lisa? And she's like, yes, so I don't think has any qualms about sharing how she feels about it.
Right.
You're not gonna have an issue with her there, but,
Well, and you know, to that point, right, this document doesn't seek to change anything, just to make sure that the chance is there, probably not with any of the currently elected office holders, but rather if there was ever a need or an issue that might arise in the future, that we could resolve it then. You know, that's all that we're trying to do here, just create something that says, hey, this is, if it needs to happen, this is how it happens.
And with it being my having to actually run for my first election,
Yeah, maybe.
I've got 1,000 things running through my head and
Well,
I'm not
and,
even.
if something like this was put into place and you decided that you didn't want to run for re-election, you could always punt it to the commission, right? Then if this was in place, or if you wanted to run for re-election, you wouldn't. So that's kind of what's nice about this
Yeah,
structure.
Well,
you know. But my thought concept of it is if I don't run for election, I don't have a job. That's what it actually kind of was.
that's a very good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, and in all honesty, the way we're right, that clause kind of reads, it almost lends itself to the status quo. Simply because you're not gonna take the time to go in front of the people to ask for a change unless you really think that it's something that's worthwhile and necessary.
Right.
Because if everything's working the way it's working, you're not just gonna go, hey,
Let's go
switch
change
it up,
Yeah.
you know, for
And
no
that's-
reason. I mean, unless you really think, hey, there's really some efficiency to be found and somebody's retiring and we got this set up and it's all working, but we could really find some efficiency, then you're gonna go, you know, because as a commission, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, we don't like to stick our neck out more than we have to, generally speaking. You know, because you don't just wanna just throw stuff in front of the people for no reason. You know, and I guess I can't speak for future commissions.
And you could run, like for my office, my deputy is a little bit older than I am. We might very well retire at the same time. And you might need the ability to fill that position if nobody were,
Right.
In all
you know,
honesty,
so
that's
that's
what,
another
yeah,
situation.
and that's one of my concerns thinking about it, is we have such small offices
Mhm.
that when you have just two people in the office, that, you know, in that
That's not a lot of
situation,
backup.
you might, 20 years from now or whatever, when it's time for you to retire, if you're both retiring at the same time, then all of a sudden you have the possibility of somebody coming into that office that has no clue how to run the office.
Right.
And I'm not saying that appointment would completely fix that, but it could possibly, because you would have the opportunity to maybe, you know, find somebody in the community that has some kind of a background. And, you know, hopefully that person would run anyway, but, you know, that does concern me slightly, because, you know, these bigger offices like Cass County, heck, they got 20 deputy auditors. I mean, they just bring there's gonna be 3 people that run, you know?
To your point, right, so if someone does records and bookkeeping, say at like a hospital, right, they might make a good county recorder. But the difference is that if we came across a situation like you're stating, right, where you both retired at the same time and you really wish this person would be the person, they may not up and risk losing their job to run,
Yeah.
right? And so then, you mean, odds are you're gonna get someone with no experience at all, because they're the only ones that don't have something on the line by running.
Yeah.
You know, because they could run and lose their job and not get elected, right? So I think that you do miss out on some potential for qualified candidates by not having the ability to convert it, especially going forward.
Well, in that case too, I mean, where we've got an office of 2 people, you could very easily have an entirely new office that has no connection to the previous administration. So it's not just the leadership, it's also the deputy too. Unless I'm misunderstanding that.
No, yeah, completely. Well, even like the treasurer's office here, it's Lisa and then Jackie's half there and half with the auditor. So, you know, it's the same situation to a point. I mean, we're pretty streamlined here. We don't have a lot of additional people just kind of hanging around, you know, we're very efficient, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But
You
it
know,
does
and
lend
then-
itself to the
yeah.
possibility of a problem happening at some point in time.
You know, and then too, with Nathan, he doesn't live in Ramsey County, so
Yeah, he
So-
couldn't run if he wanted
he
to.
couldn't run it.
The only way he could run is if he just picked himself up and moved into,
Yeah,
You would-
30 days before election.
30 days before the election, he would have to move in. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other issue. We're talking about
Yeah,
really a
I
lot
mean,
of
you
different
could, you know,
possibilities, but
But the point
essentially this gives you the opportunity. It's strict,
built
but
in.
not too strict.
Right, and so then I will seek a vote of the committee not to approve this for inclusion in the draft charter, but a vote of the committee to present this as written to the 3 currently elected office holders to get their feedback.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Do we need any revision to this? Or any thoughts on this before we approve it?
Well, it's
Yeah,
just,
I was just gonna say, I'd like to, get their feedback on that to make sure that everybody's on the same page and okay with that, cause I know, with my job, if somebody was looking at changing my job, I'd want to be able to get feedback on it, so I think that's what I'm looking for here, is to make sure that, everybody's positions that we're looking at potentially changing down the road are okay with it.
And I guess I would say, just to be clear, obviously with them, that this is not the finished language.
Right.
It's what our thought process is now.
To get there.
We want your feedback. You might think it's, one of the three might think it's great, might think it's horrible. We can bring it back, talk about it later. And then we'll go from there.
Could we get a copy of it emailed as well?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to type it up and clean it up to the best of my limited legalese.
That, and I would say, are we gonna do it, is this motion basically to present them this and then give them the opportunity either to respond in writing or to come speak with us on camera, so we have some?
That's correct, yeah. So this isn't even to include it as written in any draft charter or anything, right?
Just to give them an idea.
Conversation.
I just want you to empower me that this is the language we want to approach these elected officials with,
That's right.
to discuss it with them.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carried. And I'll be sure to send that out to the committee as well, the way that it was written once I finish. I'm not gonna change anything, tangible about it, just to make sure all the wording sounds right.
Yeah, make sure you're not missing any information.
Right. With my chicken scratch that I tried to write down really quickly while entertaining motions. Okay, so that's good. Let me go and actually look at what the next item on the agenda is. Hey, when I close, email goes away.
So review home public meetings, or section review how public meetings went, charter drafting, and then open discussion.
Okay. So do we have any other thoughts on what we presented to the community, or how they responded to it? Anything anyone wants to get on the record, or any other just general feelings with respect to the open meetings? And in addition to that, would we feel it's valuable to potentially have another set? Or do we want to wait until we finish the draft and then do it?
I think we wait until we finish the draft.
Okay.
We've given the public an opportunity, some people took advantage of that opportunity, and, we've kind of laid out the timeline of when we're gonna have a draft at some point. I think at this point, we draft it, we get it together, and then we put it out there for people to find what they like or don't like.
One of the ideas that came up during the meeting, I don't remember if it was during the first or during the discussion kind of after the first meeting, was to have a draft put together, not necessarily a final draft, but a draft that says, in this case, we have two options that we can kind of go either or. So like in the elected officials, we could either adopt language that you,
So similar
Recommended.
to what Ramsey County's, long-term strategic vision did with respect to the clauses there? But I know you probably weren't in those meetings.
sorry.
Was it Eric that suggested that? Because he was there, I just thought.
Oh, you mean on the
Right,
comprehensive plan?
Right, where they gave an either or on two different provisions. I think that we could do that. I think that it might be better to do that on a provisional rather than an entire document basis.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna strain us quite a bit to try to find ways to differentiate two different documents, but rather.
Yeah, I was
With
thinking just as a result of our discussions here, so like when the committee here isn't completely certain which direction we wanna go with, Title IV. We have options that we can say, this is what the committee is considering,
And
and
so
get direct feedback that way.
with respect to feedback, are we considering that feedback to be binding? Are we seeking, you understand what I'm saying? So
No, I
like
would
putting this to
still
a vote, is it a survey? Is it like
I would still put it in the informational meeting type, where that feedback is meant to color the discussion in here.
okay. Because, and to.
Because I don't wanna borderline into that public hearing
Right.
level.
So, because the only concern that I have, now that we've passed sort of a general educational meeting with the public, is you saw how detailed and nuanced and that's really
Oh,
some of
yes.
the people's concerns were, and how in the weeds it got. And I think that one of my concerns is that if we keep kind of venturing out into the community with individual provisions that we want them to vet for us, it's gonna do two things. One, I think it could potentially, if we do it too often, make this committee look ineffectual in making decisions and could reduce, the public's faith that this is in fact a good document that, that we do support. And two, it could really bog us down for long periods of time simply by having too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, it's hard enough trying to get all 9 of us on the same page, or even a majority of us. It's much harder when you expand that scope a great deal. And so I'm not opposed to it, right? And maybe once or twice if we especially have something that, we really are at an impasse about. But if we can avoid doing that, I think it might be in our best interest not to.
I guess I was more or less replying to Adam's suggestion of doing one more.
Yeah, I think we just, we draft it, we put the draft out there for people to read, and then we have our public hearing. And at that point, if we have a certain document that has, this is what what we're looking at, it's not finalized, but this is our draft, this is where we're steering towards. People are gonna come and say, I don't think that's right. And they're gonna give us their input, if we put, for instance, 60% threshold for enacting a tax, if that's legal, people are gonna walk in and go, oh, I like that, or they're gonna go, because that's where we're gonna hear it at. We're gonna hear it where it comes to all these points where, where we heard it at the initial meeting. It's, what are you gonna do with the offices? What are you gonna do with taxation? What are you gonna do with level for, if you wanna put an initiative in a referendum, what level do you have to hit for collecting votes? I mean, we're gonna hear it on all those specific points, because, 90% of this is boilerplate. Right. But there's just about 4 or 5 places where you can just see, this is where the questions are gonna be, this is where the comments are. Right. And so for that reason, because we kind of know what the concerns are gonna be, I'd say we just write this to the best of our ability and just be ready to either, defend or amend what we've written. Yeah, and at that point, when we have the public hearing, we make the clear statement that this is our draft, this is where we've come to, but that doesn't mean we're not amenable to ideas and the possibility of change. If everybody in this meeting says we're wrong on this, we'll take that to heart, we'll come back and we'll have a good discussion about possibly making a change to that clause. Okay. With respect to the next meeting of this committee, I'd like to put it forth to those here that I would like to, in hopes that we actually start moving forward on drafting, I would like to take the prior home rule charter written for Ramsey County and go through and have a provision by provision vote on whether or not to adopt that into our charter, so that we can at least create a basis for where we want to start from, and that during that voting process, if we need to amend it to make sense for whatever has changed, or reject it outright, do so then. Is there any sense of whether or not this committee likes that idea?
Yes.
Because then at that point, at the next meeting, I will hopefully have all of the feedback with respect to this clause, so that at that point we can discuss whether or not to amend, adopt, or reject it outright.
I thought that was kind of the goal for this meeting too,
To do what? To draft?
to do that initial drafting.
Do we feel that that's valuable? Would we like to do it today?
Are you guys comfortable doing that yet?
Well, I thought we were going to, use like a scanning program or something to get this in, so we could sit and make changes kind of as go we through it.
Yeah.
go along. No?
That was my understanding from the last meeting.
I'm sorry, I don't know the scanner, so.
Okay.
Could we, either get this scanned in, or my office could even type it up if we need to, and then sit down at the next meeting and
Because
start,
it's hard to do on.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we do it next meeting rather than
Yeah,
this.
I'd like to start it maybe
Is-
next.
I'm fine with doing it that way. Is it possible maybe we can kind of go through the previous document right now and just kind of look at those specific areas where we know it's going to be maybe not a contentious discussion, but where it's going to be something where it's not going to be boilerplate. and just discuss those little areas, so maybe we can come to a conclusion a little bit on where we kinda wanna go with it, to a point. I mean, it doesn't
Basically
have
boil
to
it
be,
down for the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Sure.
just to start the, I mean, cause I went and looked, you can scan into Word, and then there's, just another add-on you have to put into Word, and then it'll roll it back into a
Yeah.
document that you can use then.
Yeah, we just bought it.
Oh,
There you go, bada bing, so we can do it right when we get down here.
After my basketball game.
Well, yeah, whatever, I'm not saying immediately, but you know what I mean, we can have it ready, and you can send it back out to us, and then we can.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have it then.
For the sake of rolling into the scheduling the next meeting time and date, and I know we're gonna probably wanna sit down, and start going over this, would it be possible to schedule our meeting for late next week? Like around the 7th through the 9th of February?
or would that be too soon for everybody?
It's fine with me.
That sounds great, but I'm out of the country until the 8th.
So then the 9th it is.
Just bring your phone with you.
Well, and that's okay, I'm just throwing it out there right now that, and if it's later in February, that's fine, but basically from the 12th through the 28th, I won't be available.
Sure. Long vacation.
Well, a vacation, but then I have a conference, Colin had a conference in there, and then
Oh, okay.
Could we do Friday, February 9th?
I would be able
Okay.
As far as I can tell, I don't have anything that they said will work for me.
And forks.
I don't think it's 7.
At the usual time? 2 o'clock, and I promise I'll be there on time this time.
Or do we want to start earlier?
Do we want to start earlier? 1 o'clock?
Oh, yeah, I mean.
Because I'd imagine that this will take a lot longer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
This next meeting.
yeah, let's do
Or
one.
1:30?
Well, and you know, and we don't have to consume the whole document in one meeting either.
No.
I mean, it's gonna take a few
Either that or
meetings.
just pick, okay, next meeting, we're gonna review pages,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
Is it,
you know.
for the sake of, and I like the organization, but because I think that some of these provisions might be either unexpectedly contentious or might go unexpectedly smoothly, would it not be better to just get through as much as we can within an amount of time, and whatever remains, do it at the next meeting? Because my concern, if we say we need to get through this many provisions, and it ends up being a 3.5, 4 hour long meeting,
Yeah. Oh, we can always cut it short, but be prepared to do.
Like
as
articles
much.
1 through 4.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
prepared for, and then
Yeah.
if we get through it, great, if not. So we're prepared.
well, and I think at least in the beginning part of the charter, it's all really, really standard stuff.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't take very long to,
So what time did we decide on?
1 o'clock?
1.
Is that all right for everyone, 1 o'clock on
1 or
Friday?
1:30?
Would you prefer 1:30?
Do 1:30.
1:30, all right with everyone?
Yep. Because usually there's always somebody asking something right after lunch.
I should be fine at 1:30.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the next meeting to be scheduled for Friday, February 9th at 1:30 PM?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carried. With respect to approving the agenda for next week, do we have a certain number of provisions we'd like to get through? Or do we just want to express the general sentiment that we will begin going through the last home rule charter committee document and approving, amending, or adopting, or rejecting, I should say?
I would propose that we be ready to discuss Articles 1 through 5.
Okay? Motion to,
Oh, God, that's a lot of good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
prepare to
That's why I said
discuss.
ready to discuss rather than that we will accomplish.
I'm super excited about this. A lot of good stuff in here.
Articles 1 through 5 of the previous home rule charter committee draft charter. Is there any other discussion, or is there a second, I should say?
Do we want to make a motion that we need to do that, or is that what you
I
want?
wouldn't think so. Do we need a motion?
Just
Oh, you're just expressing a sentiment?
Yeah.
I think that's fair because that's about half the document. In all honesty, I don't know if we'll get that far.
I know.
But it, that way you don't, read, I guess my
Gives you a
thought.
chance to read through it,
Yeah.
highlight what you want to. and-
Yeah, my thought is, read through the first 5 articles, highlight what you want to, and then make notes if you wanna make changes, and have
Yeah.
some, if you think it's a thing that you wanna make a change and you don't necessarily know how to write it, at least have the concept there, and then we can discuss as a committee how we wanna draft something, but if you feel like you can draft something, draft it, and have it there, type of thing.
Okay.
Got the language ready.
And I
Take
think
some action.
if it's possible, and I can go and talk to her directly, but I think it would be especially valuable for Carrie to be present for the
Yes.
next meeting and the meeting following.
Yeah, I agree.
So
So we're
if
gonna need some backup.
there's any way that we can have her present, it's gonna matter a lot.
What is Friday, is that a problem for her that you know of?
I,
Because court's usually Wednesday, right?
court's Mondays,
Mondays.
but she's got jury trial. I
I
don't know.
mean, I know she's busy,
like, she's
Yeah,
so
she's
swamped
all
that,
stacked up.
yeah.
but hopefully she can find a little time.
Yeah.
Even if she can't attend the whole meeting, if she could attend the end of the meeting so that we can present what we've had to
Yeah.
her, give her between that and the next meeting to ensure that it's legal.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Strongly request her for
Yeah.
presence for the last half hour.
Yeah, so we should maybe say, hey, this we can find, because I guess I'm starting with the assumption that the original draft charter here that we're looking at
Is
was
legally-
obviously looked at by Lonnie at that point in time. So he must have felt that it was kosher at that point. So if that's the case, then we can start with the assumption that this is all valid. So then anything, we'll just have to say, this is what we wrote. Is this okay? Or not?
Does this sound goofy to
Yeah,
you?
because again, that's like my question of, for instance, the sales tax. If we wanted to put a 60% threshold on it, I would assume we can do that because as long as we don't drop below what state law would say at 50%,
Yeah.
we can make it harder. We just can't make it easier. We can't go, 33% of the people vote for something, then it's okay, type of thing. So, and that could be on a number of clauses. So,
Yeah,
I agree, yeah.
yeah, that'd be interesting. It'll be interesting to have a discussion about that, because I agree at that point, it's really just where do you choose to set your bar? I think the 60 is pretty high, but
Well, and I think that's what the thought, what the
Right.
people in the room was, is they want it to be a high bar so that it's,
The recurring comment was you're spending other people's money.
yeah.
So you wanted to have a significant agreement on that so that you didn't have to say, well, 51% voted for it. Versus
Yeah.
having that 60% says basically, you're in the strong minority if you disagree with this.
well, I take the point, right?
Yeah.
But less than 60 elects the president of the United States.
Well, less than 50 does.
Right. But I mean, well, as proven in the most recent election. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that I agree with you.
Yeah.
I like it, we should set up an electoral college for this.
How about now? Let's not do that, because then this really will
Well,
fail.
and is it okay if I expand upon a couple things that just kind of popped in my mind about the second meeting?
Sure.
We talked a little bit about the concept of, and it's just, I bring this up so that as a committee, we can think about it before the next meeting. I don't know if it falls in the 5 articles, but the idea of at-large versus districts or commissioners was brought up in the meeting. And I'm not saying anywhere or all, but the discussion was just had at the meeting. I don't know if there was a consensus how people felt, but just worth the discussion. And the other one was, there was some feeling both ways about the concept of an initiative and referendum referral type setup on, we don't want to be voting on a bunch of frivolous stuff, but we don't want it to be so hard to do that it's impossible. So where is that threshold?
Sure.
There's also an interesting remark on that, if I may expand real quick, on basically there's another moratorium say if you do this and if you do a referendum and it fails, give us a break for a little bit rather than just coming year after year with the same signatures.
Well, and I think that that's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Because you could potentially have a small but very vocal, very, advocative
Yeah,
group of people for whatever cause that could potentially do that, even if your threshold was fairly significant,
Yeah.
like say 30%.
Yeah.
And so I agree, and I think that maybe a 3 or 5 year moratorium would be reasonable.
Well, and in all honesty, sometimes on the referendums or the initiatives, say it goes on the ballot and it fails. Well, maybe, it gives the commissioner, whomever would make that decision, time to remedy it before, maybe it's gonna take time to remedy something that might not happen in 2 years, maybe it's a 4-year solution or something like that.
Sure.
But it brings to the attention that, hey, this is a problem and we need to do something about it.
But in general, the comments on initiated and referred measures, that discussion was not on whether or not it's a good and valid thing to have in the county, but rather, again, on what the bar is set as.
Yeah. Overall, there were some comments that they just don't think we should include it at all.
yeah, the second meeting had that sentiment expressed
Yeah.
pretty vocally. Yeah.
Just simply because they thought, that
We don't need to be
we might, that it was just impossible to set the bar high enough to make it so we don't vote on stuff all the time, essentially. And, that's valid to a point. I mean, some people don't want to vote on any more than they have to a point, just because, it doesn't make, you have to be more informed, I guess, to a point. And I don't think that's a bad thing in my opinion, but
I mean,
there are some frivolous things we've voted on in the past at the state level for initiative and referral as well. I mean,
well, and that may be true, right? But that's democracy.
Yeah.
Right.
but again, just having the discussion about where you set the level is
Sure.
going to be kind of interesting.
Well, and I think, something like a bar like 33%, so a third of people need to be on with signatures to initiate, that's such a high bar that you can almost guarantee that there would be 51% of people in the community that would want it.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I think this is a fairly decent number here already. That in the old one, it says the number of signatures required to exercise these powers is at least equal in number to 15% of the number of electors voting in the county for the office of governor in the last general election. 15% is pretty
high.
That's pretty high. I think the state, for instance, on a just a normal law, not a constitutional change, is only, well, if it's 13,000 votes right now, or 13,000 signatures right now, and that's probably only, 2% or something. And I think the constitutional changes are twice that. So 15% is a pretty good threshold.
I agree.
I mean, I don't know how many signatures that will, in the last election, gubernatorial would have been last one, there was about, and it's on the year of the presidential elections, so probably about 6,000 people voted in Ramsey County, give or take. So that's,
700 and some.
700 and something. I mean, that takes a concerted effort to go out and get 700 and something signatures. I mean, it's not totally difficult, but it's
Right.
takes.
Well, I mean, so I think that there's a bar and a threshold, and potentially we can just adopt as is from the last one. Because again, I think that lends a little bit of credibility to our current draft if we include a lot from the last one. And we just say this was what they thought was a good idea back in 1990, and we think it's a good idea in 2018, and so it's probably a good idea in 2030.
Well, it was kind of an interesting sidebar during the meeting and then also just out and about after the meetings. That's actually a point that I had heard a few times, was saying, this has never been actually brought to the people. And they've used that as something that is hopeful for this attempt. So it wasn't so much, hey, we've tried this before and we'll fail again. It was, we as the people would like to actually have a vote on this. So it was kind of a slight twist, but an interesting one.
Right. No, that's good to hear, really good to hear, very promising. And again, I mentioned this at the Tuesday night meeting, but I think it bears repeating. I think that the fact that we're doing this now, when we have no specific change or ask that we're trying to make for the county, makes this endeavor actually fairly noble. Because it means that we're not doing this just so we can build a jail, we're not doing this because we really dislike Candy the auditor and want to get her out of office. It's
I'm on vacation.
you know, that really we are here because we can see how this might be valuable going forward. So, okay, is there any other business that we need to attend to? Any other comments? Any other concerns? Any other feedback?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
We stand adjourned.